Let's start with introductions. So I am going to go over the board of directors of FTLAC. And Aaron Scar from Tillamook County was unable to make it this morning, so I'm sorry she is not here. I know I saw Courtney Baggs. Courtney's behind the mask. Courtney, want to say hello?
I think she's still muted.
I think she's teaching.
Okay, well, I see her there, so that's perfect. Margaret Magruder, I see Margaret.
Good afternoon. I am joining you from beautiful downtown Arlington, Oregon at the Oregon Sheepers Association convention.
I love that. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here, Margaret. So Craig Pope, I'm not sure Craig is here, but I think we have Will Tucker. Will.
Thank you. I'm back for a few months of being off this board. Appreciate coming back on. And I join you today on the banks of the South Santiam at Waterloo.
There you go. That's perfect. And Brenda, I'm not sure how this works. So we just had our annual meeting in November, just a few weeks ago, and we elected some new members, Will Tucker being a replacement for Craig Pope. But I don't know if that is supposed to take place after the first of the year or at our next meeting. We normally don't have FTLAC meetings in December, so I don't know what the rule is here, but be that as it may, Commissioner Tucker is with us, and I think that's perfect. As long as you're okay with that. Brenda, nodding yes. Perfect. Okay. And Bob Main. Bob, were you able to join us? I didn't see you.
I think he's trying to figure out how to get on here. Could someone send him the link? I couldn't find it to send him.
Oh, God.
I did not skook him enough to do it from my calendar.
I certainly
please do it.
That.
Otherwise, he's going to come here and sit in my lap to be involved.
So, Brenda, could we ask you please to send this meeting link to Commissioner Main? Thank you so much. So those are the board of directors, but I do see we have quite a few other commissioners online. Let me see here. We have Chair Harrington. Chair Harrington, please say hello.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you.
Thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. Commissioner Willie from Washington County also.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Jerry Willie, Washington County Commissioner, District 4. And I'm probably going to turn my video off so I can eat my lunch and you don't have to watch. So, okay, but I'm here.
Thanks.
Thank you.
The things we have to do for video meetings, right? I know. Casey Garrett from Columbia County. Casey.
Hi there. Happy to be here in St. Helens, and Margaret, my smarter commissioner, is somewhere else in Oregon right now, but happy to see your face, Margaret.
Thank you for that. Let's see here. Commissioner Freeman, Douglas County. Tim?
Good afternoon, everybody. Glad to join you.
Thank you for being here, Tim. Appreciate that very much. Commissioner Thompson from Clatsop County.
Commissioner, Mr. Chair, thank you kindly. Happy to be here with you today. Happy to see your smiling face. Can you say cheese?
Cheese? I can say cheese. I can.
Any day of the week, right?
You
Cheese,
bet.
breeze, and ocean breeze.
Thank you for being here. And then he disappeared again. I saw Commissioner Main. Then he just, oh, there he is. Bob, you want to say hello?
I heard it. He must be muted.
We'll let him figure that out. Welcome, Bob. Thank you for coming back.
Yeah, I'm unmuted. Hello.
Perfect. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Let's see. Other commissioners. Commissioner Cameron.
Great, Kevin Cameron, Marion County. It's good to be with you.
Thank you for being here, Kevin. Appreciate that very much. Let's see if we had it yet. I don't, although I know I'm going to get in trouble here for not seeing all of the commissioners here. Do we have any other commissioners that I have passed? And I apologize if I did.
Lyle Waters, Polk County.
Oh, Lyle,
Everybody.
thank you for being here. I didn't see you the first time through. Thank you for being here. Any others?
Well, John Sweet, I'm here.
Oh, John, how can I forget you? Well, that's because you're not on my list. You're up at the top of the list. I apologize for that.
Physically, anyway.
So sorry. So we do have some very special guests with us today. We've got Board of Forestry Chair Jim Kelly. Good morning or good afternoon, Jim.
Good afternoon. I've had my espresso. I should be able to stay awake. I'm raring to listen to you guys.
Thank you for that. I think I saw Carla Chambers. Carla, are you with us?
I'm with you today. Thank you.
Perfect.
I'll look forward to hearing what you all have to say.
Thank you for being here. And we've got quite a few people, 53 participants now, so we keep adding. Any other Board of Forestry members with us this morning or this afternoon? I keep saying this morning. Okay, so I did notice also we've got AOC CEO, Association of Oregon Counties, Gina Perman-Nickel. Gina, say hi.
Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see you.
Thank you for being here. Oh, I forgot one of the most important people. We've got Kel Mukumoto with us. Kel.
Oh, there we go. Hi, Commissioner.
Thank you.
And I want to say hi to my friends in Coos County, John Sweet and Bob Main. How you guys doing?
Fine. How are you doing?
We can talk. Cafe 101. When do you want to get some coffee?
I know you've got a lot going on there. I know that's the case. I also want to welcome Mark Rasmussen. Mark, I saw you there earlier.
I'm here. Hello.
Perfect. Thank you. And Mike Buffo. Mike.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you for being here. And Drenda, I want you to introduce yourself, please.
Thank you. It's Brenda Howitt, AOC and Council for Forest Trust Land County staff. Commissioner Yamamoto, I think we have Commissioner Freeman here as well.
Yeah, I'm sure we called on Tim.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry I missed that bit.
No. I appreciate that very much. My mind is so scattered these days. Liz Dent, Liz, please. And can you introduce your staff that you have with us today, please?
Yeah, of course. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Liz Dent. I serve as the State Forest Division Chief. Good to see everybody today. And I thought maybe let's start with the district foresters introducing yourselves. So I'll call you out. Kate Skinner, are you here? Yeah,
I'm here. Good afternoon, Kate Skinner, Tillamook District Forester.
Kate, great to see you. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Dan, goody.
Afternoon, folks. It's a sunny day in Astoria. Good to see y'all.
The weather is beautiful here on the coast. It really is. It's gorgeous.
Mike Cafferetta.
Good afternoon, Mike Cafferetta, Forest Grove District Forester. Good to see you all.
Michael Curran.
Folks, Michael Curran, District Forester for West Oregon District.
Ola Book, you out there?
Yes, I am. Good afternoon, everyone. Ola Book, Western Lane District Forester.
Perfect.
Yeah, congratulations. I think that just happened last week, maybe this week.
It did. Thank you.
Ola's been, of course, a part of these meetings for a good decade or so, but new status there is District Forester. So pretty exciting.
Super. Thank you.
Kyle Kopp. I think I saw you here.
Good afternoon, all. Kyle Kopp, Stand-Am Unit Forester for the North Cascade District, ODF.
And Steve Wilson, if you're here, there are so many names. I may miss you, but if you're here, go ahead and introduce yourself. Okay, Andy White. I think I saw Andy here. he's not a district forester, Northwest Oregon Area Director. And maybe on there, I see you there in name only at least. Okay, he might be engaged in something else.
Could be
So,
napping. Just kidding.
yeah, right. So those are the field folks. Wanted to give some other folks from Salem a chance to say hello. So Ron Zilli.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ron Zilli, serve as the Deputy Division Chief for State Forestry Planning.
Okay, thank you.
Mike Wilson.
Good afternoon, everyone. Mike Wilson, the Deputy Division Chief of Policy and Technical Support.
And then part of the program today and presenting is Justin Buttress. So Justin, you'd like to introduce yourself?
Hi, good afternoon. Justin Buttress, Policy Analyst in the State Forest Division.
So a lot of other folks here, appreciate everyone being here from ODF, and it's good for all of our folks to be a part of these conversations. And so thanks everyone for being here. I thought I'd just take a minute to make a short announcement that I have accepted a position with the PNW Research Station with the Forest Service. So very exciting opportunity, very hard decision. We have a lot of really important work that we're doing with state forests, and really hard to leave all the exceptional people that I've had the pleasure of working with for a long time. 26, 28 years, something like that.
Wow.
So it has been a hard decision, but it's a really exciting opportunity. So this will be my last FTLAC meeting.
Wow, Liz, and we talked earlier today, and we're going to miss you greatly. We really are.
Yeah.
I mean, there are times when we disagree on things, and that's normal. That's always going to be the case with everybody. I tell people that if we agree on everything, then you're me or I'm you, and there is no difference. But I've always enjoyed the fact that even after protracted arguments, not really arguments, but disagreements, things that we're always able to continue to have conversations. And you're a wonderful person, and we're going to miss you so much. We really will.
Thank you. Thank you for those kind words. That means a lot.
Thank you for everything you've done.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much. We do. Okay, so we're up to 55 participants now. Anyone else out there, please, that I can't go through all 55 at this point. And remember who has introduced themselves and not. But if you'd like to introduce yourself, please just speak up and let us know you're out there.
Hi, Katie Jacobson, Lincoln County Commissioner.
Commissioner, how are you? We missed another commissioner.
Good,
Thank you for being here, Katie. Appreciate that very much. Anyone else?
Hi, everyone. John DiLorenzo, Class Counsel, Lynn County versus Oregon Board of Forestry.
Mr. DiLorenzo, thank you for being here. Appreciate that.
And I think I missed the introductions first time around. Andy White, Northwest Oregon Area Director.
Perfect. Thank you for being here.
Seth Barnes, Oregon Forest Industries Council. Thanks for having me.
Hey, Seth, thank you for being here. Appreciate it very much.
Amanda Astor, Forest Policy Manager for Associated Oregon Loggers. Thanks for having me too.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate that.
Hey, David, could I wanted to just add a little bit more information about my departure. Sorry, I'd forgotten the rest of the story here, which is Kate Skinner is going to be the interim State Forest Division Chief, and she'll be sitting there in that position, not sitting there. She'll be in the position for 3 months. So that allows adequate time for the recruitment process, which we're already working on, and to hire a permanent person into the State Forest Division Chief role. So thank you, Kate, and the Tillamook District. There's always musical chairs when we do this. So, but thanks, Kate, for stepping up for that. I apologize.
I will echo that. I've had the pleasure of knowing Kate, working with Kate for many years here in Tillamook County, and she's a great one. She really is. So, Kate, looking forward to working with you in the future. I am.
Thanks, David.
Absolutely. Anyone else? Oh, Nancy Weiss. She says, I'm here. She's having computer problems. That's what I was having this morning, was computer problems. People couldn't hear me. So it's probably a good thing sometimes. It is. Anyone else?
Just Courtney Banks here. I wanted to check my audio this round.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can. So I was asking you to introduce yourself, and apparently you weren't hearing me either, but that's okay. Thank you for being here, Courtney. Thank you. Who else? Okay, hearing none. Let's move on. Our next agenda item is public comments. Do we have any public comments from anyone? Laura Wilkerson. Laura, you didn't even introduce yourself, but now you can introduce yourself.
I never know if like the general public is supposed to introduce themselves, so I just stay quiet until I raise my hand.
So you'd like to make a public comment?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I don't often address this group, but I just wanted to take a minute. There's an issue of concern that I just wanted to raise. So Hampton and a few others in the industry have discussed this. And at the last Board of Forestry meeting in November, the State Forest Division presented an update on the performance metrics, and that included carbon storage information. The data that they used to show carbon stores showed that that was actually declining on state forests over the past 10 years. This led to a lot of questioning of how that could be true, especially when over that same time, ODF stand level inventory has shown volume increasing on state forests. So it's especially true if you consider that same data showed that industrial lands was also slightly increasing, as were federal lands. So if you just look at the different prescription mechanisms on state versus private, I don't know how industrial lands could be going up and state going down at such a rapid decline. It just seems like ODF may have been rushed into presenting this information before they fully understood what it meant. And this also led to questions from board members on harvest levels. It's also just really crucial to this carbon discussion to include life cycle analysis, substitution, leakage rates, and those societal benefits that manufacturing and wood products give. So the OFIC State Lands Committee, which Hampton CEO is chair of, sent a letter to the board asking that the department provide some clarification on how the inventory and this carbon data could be so different from each other at the next board meeting. And you should be receiving a copy of that letter as well. So appreciate your time. Happy to answer any questions, and thanks.
Thank you for being here, Laura. Thank you for those public comments. Do we have any questions of Laura? Seeing none, I see Jim Fairchild. Jim, please introduce yourself.
Okay, I think my audio is on now. You can hear me?
Yes, perfect. Yes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Yamamoto, fellow advisory committee members, and to the visiting county commissioners. My name is Jim Fairchild, and at the last meeting, I was unable to give testimony during the scheduled comment period. I attended as conservation chair of the Audubon Society of Corvallis, but today I comment as an interested individual and Benton County resident, and would request a little extra time to introduce myself to you all and provide my personal comment so you can understand where I'm coming from. I worked for a decade for Oregon Department of Forestry out in West Oregon District Office, mostly in protection from fire, as a forest officer. From that position, I moved on to OSU as a faculty research assistant for forest sciences and fisheries and wildlife departments. Since that time, I've run a woodworking business and managed 80 acres of forest land of mixed conifer hardwood with a remnant prairie, including multiple listed species. The average stand age here is around 80 years old. It's highly variable, and I regularly sell timber and produce value-added product. So I'm very much a part of the forest industry of Oregon. I have a few concerns regarding the FTLAC, but let me first preface those by saying that Benton County Commissioners were involved in the crafting and development of the greatest permanent value rule, which was right and proper for all trust land counties. Some of you are dissatisfied with that rule, but that dissatisfaction does not reflect the entirety of the counties you represent. And the Department of Forestry and its policy setting board, who you seek to advise, is no longer the agency I worked for in the 1980s. It has evolved, to my thinking, much for the better. So on to my comments. First, for historical context, which you all know, trust land counties could not afford to manage these foreclosed lands and burden the state with their care. The benefit of that burden should not be solely to the benefit of trust land counties, but shared between the state and those counties. Second, the current makeup of the FTLAC no longer geographically represents the trust land counties, and divergence from its majority opinion apparently excludes interest by representation of minority opinions. I think the Board of Forestry is aware of this, and it does not raise the credibility of your advice. Regarding specifics to the HCP alternative FTLAC presented last meeting, your proposal to dispatch nest predators to marbled murrelets or dispatch barred owl competitors to spotted owls at a scale that would mitigate for continuing murrelet and spotted owl forest habitat losses really needs vetting and review of such a project's economic costs and the ecological benefit before you should expect the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to give it serious consideration. Still, they will. But remember that same agency is also charged with discharging the needs of the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. Fourth, a decision on the greatest permanent value rule at the Board of Forestry's upcoming January meeting is a subject of great importance to you. I hope you will proceed with caution and know that a pause on forest management plan and habitat conservation plan development is not necessarily in your county's best interest. And lastly, I hope you will open your process towards holding regular, consistent meetings, publicizing those well in advance, and welcoming as much public participation as you have welcomed time for attorneys ready to advance a particular notion at great cost to the state. And I thank you for your time.
Jim, we appreciate that comment very much. I've learned over time that public comment is pretty much strictly that. And even though I think I could wax eloquent on many of the points you made, I am not going to do that at this point. This would take up the entire meeting. It really would. But we do appreciate you being here very much. We do. Thank you, Jim. Do we have any other public comments? Hearing none, let's move on. So we're going to get some comments from the Board of Forestry Chair, Jim Kelly. Jim.
Thank you, Chair. So it was nice to hear that you have a beautiful sunny day there on the coast. I heard you had one of those last year too.
Yeah, it was one, yes.
Yeah. Anyhow, want to really express my appreciation, the board's appreciation that you guys are meeting regularly. Obviously, we have lots of issues of importance to the counties and to the board, evidenced by how many people you've got there today. So that's all really great, and I'm just glad that we can attempt to keep working together through all of this important work still while this lawsuit is not settled. And of course, we all look forward to the day when that is all finalized. But anyhow, my role again today will primarily be listening to you all. I'll try to have a thicker skin than I did last meeting. And I did just want to comment to Laura Wilkerson's or respond what Laura brought up. At this point, the board very much has not, we were presented that information just days before that board meeting around the level of the trending on carbon in the state forests. And certainly we're not at the point where we feel that information is reliable. So we're very much in agreement with Laura that this is something that's a very important topic and something that we very much want to get to the bottom of, but we're not at the point where we're taking the information that we've gotten as gospel until we can do a lot more examination of all of that. Other than that, I will continue to listen to all of you and And thank you again for meeting once again regularly.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate that so much. I really do. And it's great for you to be here. It is. Next, we're going to hear from Kel Mukumoto, the new state forester. Kel.
Well, here I am again. So I appreciate being here. This is great that we're able to meet with the counties on these important topics. I've been in the state forester's position, I guess lengthwise, it's been 3 weeks. This is the 3rd week. But, you know, we had that big holiday in between, so really 2.5 weeks. Today I was in a fire meeting and people kept talking about me drinking from a fire hose. And I thought that the thing was appropriate, and it is like drinking from a fire hose. But during that last 2.5 or 3 weeks, I had the chance to meet with the CFTLC in Eugene, and I appreciate the hospitality and the transparency and just the conversation we had in Eugene. I think it was a good experience, and I'd like to continue that. And with that in mind, I'd like to say, you know, my background is basically, I've been a forester, I've been a businessman, I've worked in a lot of different areas. I've worked a lot with tribes, and I think tribes have given me the conscience of the meaning of the importance of being in the social sector of the sustainability equation when you talk about forest management. And so, and living in Coos County, I mean, one of the best places on earth, right, John, Bob? I see nods up there. I mean,
don't forget Tillamook County now.
Well, I know, your county's good too. I just have to say, Coos County is really a nice place to live. I also experienced firsthand, you know, the importance of forests and the benefits of forests to communities. And so I really appreciate us getting together. I look forward to meeting all of you, and thank you so much for allowing me to attend. I have to say I do have a little bit of a conflict, so I may drop off in this meeting, but I did want to make sure that you knew that I do exist, and please feel free to contact me at any time. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Cal, thank you for being here. We do appreciate it very much. We do.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. DiLorenzo has his hand up. John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I wasn't necessarily going to comment, but I did want to address a couple comments that were made by Mr. Fairchild and before you approve your minutes, because my comment has to do with what was in the minutes of the last meeting. I'd like to call your attention to page 2 of the meeting summary that accompanied the agenda. And the third, fourth, and fifth bullet points talked about Commissioner Bangs expressing the fact that she had watched the Board of Forestry retreat last week on YouTube and had expressed some disappointment that the Board of Forestry indicated that the counties were out of touch because of their focus on economic impacts. And during that time, the Commissioner asked that FTLAC and the Board of Forestry acknowledge that decisions made make a very deep impact on communities. Chair Kelly commented that Commissioner Banks' comment that the Board of Forestry does not care about all of Oregon was disrespectful, and that the Board of Forestry must represent the voices of all of Oregon. Chair Kelly encouraged Commissioner Bangs to re-listen to the retreat and suggested that her representation was not an accurate depiction of what was said. Well, Mr. Chair, I listened to the retreat. I listened to a 30 to 40 minute segment of the October 6th board retreat, which related to the board's relationship with the counties, and that began on my timepiece at 2 hours and 47 seconds into the retreat. Chair Kelly did make the following statements. First of all, he said leadership of FTLAC sees maximization of timber value as, quote, the only thing, unquote. Number 2, he said that was, quote, out of touch, unquote, with state sentiment. Number 3, he said he wishes that FTLAC leadership looked more broadly at economies. And number 4, he said counties need to, quote, open their minds, unquote. I don't think Commissioner Bang's statements were disrespectful at all in light of those comments that I heard at the retreat. Now, I would just like to briefly add the following. Number 1, it is no wonder that the counties view timber production and revenue as the primary greatest permanent value, because several courts have already affirmed the fact that we have a contract. Number 2, that may be, quote, out of touch, unquote, with the sentiment of Oregonians as a whole, but I suggest that doesn't matter. For instance, public employees have contract rights in their interests in the Oregon Public Employee Retirement Fund. Does it matter if Oregonians as a whole think the pension benefits for Department of Forestry employees are too rich? That doesn't matter at all, because those employees have a pension contract with the state. Well, Mr. Chair and members, we have a contract too. Now, as far as economies go, when ODF and U.S. Forest Service and BLM began to purposely create ESA habitat, they permanently deprived our local economies of an industry which they have never bothered to replace. The spotted owl and the marbled murrelet cannot feed anyone's families. These regulatory agencies are, in my view, responsible for the circumstance which we now face, in which generations of young people have no recollection of their parents getting up early in the morning to go to work. And finally, it is my experience, having known all of you and having had the honor to represent you as class members, that the leadership of these counties do have open minds. All they are demanding is to be treated as partners, not as mere stakeholders in this arrangement. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This concludes my comments. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, John. Appreciate you being here very much. Okay, moving on. So the next agenda item that we have is indeed approval of the October 8th FTLAC meeting minutes. And these are really not meeting minutes. This is a meeting summary. And I have heard from several of you that they question some of the things in this meeting summary. So what I would prefer to do today, I do not think we want to approve this meeting summary. And I am going to ask Drenda. Drenda, there is an audio recording of our October 8th meeting. And I apologize for this, but I'm gonna have to ask you to listen to that recording, read the meeting summary that we have been provided. And after you do that, let's talk if we can. Would that be okay with you? I appreciate that so much. So again, if there are no objections from the other commissioners, I am going to postpone the approval of this meeting summary.
Commissioner Yamamoto,
yes.
I would just offer, as you think about all that, of course, when we started using the recording feature of these meetings, we had a conversation around, is it useful to also write minutes? Because the recording is, clearly the record. And so this might be a good example of the recording is available, there's some summary being done, and now going back and comparing that to the recording. So I know that in other public meeting forums that the recordings have been used as the official record. So I might just offer that as a more efficient way to do this, to meet this need.
No, I appreciate that very much. So I think John Sweet and I will discuss this and figure out what best way to do that. Because one of the issues with approving a meeting summary or meeting minutes, if there are things that are incorrect in it, it can create problems. So Thank you for that, Liz. I appreciate it very much. I appreciate that. Any other comments about us bypassing the approval of the meeting summary at this point? Hearing none, let's get on into the real business of this meeting. I'm going to turn it back over to Liz to look at an FMP and HCP timeline update. Liz.
Yeah, so really, I am just handing it off at this point to Justin and Mike. And so I thought the next thing on the agenda, so maybe I was wrong. Let me double check that. Gotcha. Okay, so the FMP and HCP timelines, Mike Wilson is going to walk us through those. So Mike, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike.
All right, hopefully everybody's looking at a PowerPoint slide of that timeline.
Yes.
And I'm in a mode where I can't see any of you, unfortunately, but you can just holler at me if you have a question. I really wanted to go over primarily so we'll go over the HCP and NEPA timeline first, and then the FNP timeline. So currently, as you all are aware, we are in the NEPA process for the development of the draft EIS for the HCP. As was noted at the last board meeting, that draft EIS will come out in the middle of March sometime. That's what we're targeting, or that's what the services are targeting. At that point, we will also release a public comment draft of the HCP. And just so that everybody is tracking on this, the draft that we currently have in process is an administrative draft, which is what we started the EIS process with. The public, and we've done a lot of public engagement, but the public comment draft is where the federal services can begin their official public comment period on it. So during that time, let me see if I can get my pointer. Well, I don't think yes, I can. Here we go. Okay, so once those are released, then federal comment can begin on the draft EIS and the draft HCP. And that is a federal comment period. So that's where those comments get directed, is to the services. Comments on the draft EIS are usually specific to that analysis and the adequacy of that analysis. Comments on the HCP are comments on the HCP. This is all separate part of the process and not part of all of the engagement that we've been doing for several years now on the HCP. Once the draft EIS is released, then we as the HCP applicant get to have a look at it. And one of the things that we want to do is have a meeting, a special meeting with the Board of Forestry to present the draft EIS outcomes and allow for that discussion. We are still in the process of scheduling that exact time for that to be presented. Then we plan to come back at the regularly scheduled board meeting in June and provide them with a summary of the HCP public comment from the federal side. So we'll get that comment packaged up, and even though that is comment to the federal services, we will still, however, package that up as a summary to inform the Board of Forestry. And then we will, I imagine that most of the comment that's going to be relevant to the board will have already been given in other forums, but we will do that. At which point, the board will provide us direction, and we will either enter the final EIS process with the HCP as is, or if the board directs us to make changes in that, then we would do that and then enter the final EIS process. anyway, at whatever point we enter into the final EIS process, we would apply for the incidental take permits that go along with that. Sort of dependent on whatever work is asked for there, will affect this timeline to develop a final environmental impact statement. Right now, the schedule is that would come out in January of 2023, followed by a 30-day what's called wait period in the federal process, and followed by a record of decision being published in the Federal Register. Then basically there would be an entire package for the board to look at, and they would decide whether or not they actually wanted to accept and move forward with accepting and implementing those incidental take permits. So on the Fmp timeline, we've already, of course, in November presented the guiding principles and draft goals. For March, we are on target to present draft strategies and performance measures. Really important here, I want to stress that these performance measures will be in a draft format. They will not be complete in a couple of key ways. One is the board will need to digest them and decide if they're the appropriate performance measures for them to gauge plan performance. But also they will not have modeled outcomes at that point to really be able to determine what they want as targets for those performance measures. But we will still be talking about the nature of them and putting them out there for board consideration. So in the meantime, with all of the HCP work that would be going on, we have changed this part of the timeline. We will be presenting the draft of the forest management plan to the board in September. That draft will include the adaptive management guidelines, asset management guidelines, and implementation guidelines, as well as management focus narrative and other pieces of the draft, that really make it a full document. Then during this entire period, we will be doing this more refined modeling that we've discussed beforehand of the Fmp with the HCP overlay, looking at different flow scenarios for timber and revenue over time. Anyway, we will be presenting those modeled outcomes somewhere from the November to January 2023 timeline. This piece in here is a little bit variable depending on how the modeling goes, and we want to ensure adequate time for field review, what we call our model solution reviews, and time to work with our various partners and stakeholders to make sure that we understand those things as well. Anyway, so basically further out here is an Fmp decision by the board. I would just point out that this date, May of 2023, I suppose if everything was, if we had no hitches between now and then, that would be a probable date. But I fully expect, especially with fire season, I have no reason to expect it'll be any easier on us this coming year than it has been. This may get delayed. We are taking steps to adjust our AOPs to ensure that if we have an HCP prior to a new Fmp and the implementation plans to support that Fmp, that we will be able to carry on our business under that HCP and continue to deliver on that. So with that, I guess first I'll ask Liz, is there anything I'm missing in that narrative? And then open it up to questions.
I think, no, there isn't. Just make sure folks know that there is rulemaking that has to be done in there, that the forest management plan is in and of itself an organ administrative rule. So there's some layers in there, but I think this is it's not something we want to build into this graph, but just make sure there's awareness on that.
So I've got a couple comments, if I may. And so what you're presenting here, Michael, is different than what was in our packet originally. There is no HCP public comment summary and ITP application issue. There is a final HCP on the one that I have printed, and it's not on yours. So we're going to need this updated presentation. If you can get that to us.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. Yes, appreciate that fact. Yeah, we've been working on this in the ensuing week, basically, since the holidays. One of the things that we've been doing as part of our Fnp process is we sort of continually have to go back and do what we call technical planning sprints in order to readjust the baseline and make sure that we have adequate time to do everything. Needless to say, there's a lot of extraneous factors that affect that workload and that capacity. So this is different, acknowledge that. And also we wanted to clarify a few things on it. We will send that out to you. One of the things we're doing right now actually is working to get a nicer graphical view of this. So if it's okay, I would like to wait until we get that better, basically just better graphics for you before I send that out to you again.
Okay, yeah, I probably appreciate that. And just get that to Dren, so make sure that we all get the updated version. One other question that I have, I know that the Council of Forest Trust Land Counties is supposed to have a very special partnership relationship with the Department of Forestry. I don't know if that applies to the feds when it comes to our comment about the HCP and the draft EIS. Are we just, again, so are the trust counties in the federal province just going to be stakeholders?
And so I am not an expert, so I'll qualify all of this with that on the federal process and how they digest their comments. And I don't know what sort of different perspectives they might have, but it is generally just a public comment period. And so there is no, everybody's just the public in their process, I believe. I don't believe they have any categorical separations of because of specific interest or other considerations.
Would it be possible for the department to set up a special quick meeting with them and FTLAC so that we can have a conversation with them about what we see in the draft EIS and HCP?
Maybe
I think we could talk. Oh, go ahead, Liz.
Yeah, what I would offer, and Mike, I think you were just going there, is we can reach out to Paul Henson and Kim Kratz. So I think those would be your key people. They may want one of their technical staff there. Actually, that wouldn't surprise me at all. But we can reach out to them and share that that's something that you'd like to do. And my experience with both of them is that the relationships with the counties are important, and that they, I'm guessing, would try to make time for that.
Okay. If we could do that, I think that would be helpful to us.
Right, and just something to think about. We don't have to solve it right now, David, but is the timing of that. So, do you want to think about if you would like that to happen before the draft EIS comes out, or right after, or before you comment, before that comment period? So those would just be a couple things to help us schedule it. If you wanted to know how your comments are going to be handled versus having that conversation when the draft EIS is out, so you can anchor into those findings. I think that's a couple ways to think about it.
Appreciate that very much. So I've just been notified that there are times when groups like ours can be considered cooperating agencies. You might ask if that's possible. But again, we have a great interest and a great stake in what's happening here.
Of course, yeah. If someone has some insights on that to help us frame up the question to the services, that would be great. That's not a term I've run into yet. I don't know, Mike or Cindy, have you?
The cooperating agencies, the only place that we have run into that term and that reference is in how the federal agencies refer to each other in the EIS process, in the NEPA process. And for instance, NOAA Fisheries is the lead agency in this on this EIS, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is a cooperating agency. I haven't heard them use that term outside of that context.
Again, I think it would never hurt to ask.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you for that.
And we can, and I would encourage, really, for what it's worth, this is, I would encourage perhaps a conversation that with federal agents, once the draft EIS is out, even though there is the conversation you might want to have with them about how your comments will be included prior to the draft coming out. Once it is out and everybody has a common platform to talk about their, having a open conversation with the Board of Forestry and FTLAC with the ICE services and their contractor there to be able to present results and answer questions. And I don't know if it's perhaps this same meeting that we are considering here or not, or some separate venue, but just something to perhaps consider. We've been trying to think about how to communicate this stuff consistently in a very open way for everybody involved.
So just so you know, I am a board member of the ONC Timberlands, Oregon, California Timberlands, and that occurred. We were considered a cooperating agency during the Fmp development process. So we know it has happened with counties before. So again, if we can just have that conversation with NOAA Fisheries and U.S. Fish and Wildlife, that would be very helpful to us.
Sure, do that.
Thank you for that.
David, this is John Sweet. Could I raise a question? Or I don't want to interrupt your conversation.
No. Go ahead. So we've got Will Tucker after you then. Sorry, Will. Oh, go ahead, John.
Okay, thank you so much. My thinking gets a little fuzzy sometimes on timelines because this has been going on for so long. But it seems to me that the foundation of this whole FMP process, I'll jump ahead to that, starts with the guiding principles and draft goals. Now, the County Forest Trust lands were provided with some draft goals. There were some that, quite a few we didn't like. I believe at the last Board of Forestry meeting, and stop me if I'm incorrect, you and I did not comment during our oral presentations because we didn't have time to comment on that. And we had asked our consultants, Mark and Mike, to prepare comments regarding the goals in a written form, and they were presented to the Board of Forestry.
On our behalf.
On our behalf, yes, as part of our testimony. I don't recall ever hearing anything back from either the department or the Board of Forestry regarding our input. Was it accepted in part, at least? Was it rejected? What happened to it? It strikes me as I read the draft strategies that were relating to those draft goals, that there hadn't been significant changes in the goals, despite our concerns about a good many of them. Well, if the guiding principles and the draft goals are the very foundation on which the entire rest of the process is built, and we haven't had much impact on what we thought were inappropriate goals, I don't know how the rest of the process is going to play out in a way that's going to be acceptable to the counties. And if I'm off base on this, let me know. If my memory slipped, let me know. But I've not heard anything back, and I'm not comfortable moving ahead until we at least get some consent built around the very foundation on which the plan, I believe, will be established. And I wonder, does the board, anyone from the board have any comments, or from the department have any comments that could help me with this?
Sure, Commissioner Sweet. I guess I would just say on behalf of the board, the board certainly recognizes the importance of any input coming from the trust line counties. It is different from other stakeholders, but the board itself, as a group of volunteers, is not in a position. It never even really been suggested that we have a consistent policy of responding to the input that we get. It would we would have to have quite a staff and a whole lot more hours in our days to be able to do that. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. I hear what you're saying. I can assure you that we work through all of that kind of input with staff. I don't know what Liz would want to add to that, but certainly no input, especially input from the counties, is just ignored. But at the same time, I don't see any real way that we can meet an expectation of being able to point by point. As a board, I think the department certainly has some capacity for that, but to respond point by point to input we receive.
I'll just have to say, Jim, it's very frustrating. I've been around this for 9 years, and we testify and we testify and we testify, and we don't know whether that's been accepted, rejected, ignored, what. Somehow or another, I get some feedback, maybe by order of the board to ask the department to respond. I don't know, but I guess the real question is, have we done a good job of reaching some consensus on goals? And I don't know that we have. In fact, I think we have not. And how do we move forward without that?
Yeah, so maybe.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
I just
Jim.
understand frustration. Well, I really understand your frustration, and we'll certainly have a conversation of what more we can do.
Thank you, Jim.
And I just need to pile on here. I was going to wait until we got into the forest management plan draft strategies again. But we looked at 20 draft strategies last month before, something like that. And our written testimony to the Board of Forestry was all about the draft strategies, the draft goals. And yet when I see this month's agenda items, it seems like we've increased. I recall we had 20 draft goals, and now we're up to 21 draft goals. And all the public comments, all the testimony that we gave in written form, I don't see any of it anywhere in any of the now 21 draft goals. So, John, I just have to say that I don't think any of our comments were incorporated into anything that I'm seeing to this point.
That was my feeling, but I wanted to double check myself.
Appreciate that. Mr. Tucker, Commissioner Tucker, excuse me.
I respond to either. So where I was going to start by raising my hand was back when we were talking about making sure that we had appropriate input to the federal organizations that are creating the EIS and NEPA and going through that piece. And I would want to make sure that ODF reminds them that there is only one advisory committee by law to ODF, the Board of Forestry, and that is the Council of Forest Trust Land. We're the only one that's called for in law to be advising the Board of Forestry. And so I think we have a very important role, and I will wait to give my other comments because I have draft strategy comments that I have made a couple times. I'd like to talk about it again, but we are supposed to be advising the Board of Forestry, and I'm not sure that we're being heard yet.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate that very much. Anyone else before we move forward? Thank you. Michael, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you. That's about all I had for the timeline updates specifically. I believe next, sorry here.
I think you had the strategy.
The strategy update. And so I was going to turn that over to Bodie Dowding. And before I do that, I think most of you have gotten used to over the last few months seeing Sarah Lathrop here as our Forest Management Plan project manager. She unfortunately had to step away from those duties due to some family considerations. But while we certainly miss her and appreciate all the work that she did, we're very happy to have Bodie Dowding who come on and take over as the project manager. And as part of that, he has been orchestrating the technical work and trying to keep this train on the tracks. And he will be giving his first presentation to you today on the strategies. And normally, Bodie is one of our log accountability specialists here in the State Forest Division. And so he is very familiar with our operations, right down to the tracking of the logs to the mills and the revenue that generates. So anyway, with that, I'll turn it over to Bodie.
Bodie, I want to welcome you to your first FTLAC meeting where you're going to be presenting and you're jumping from the frying pan into the fire. It's just a joke, you know, but welcome.
I appreciate the chance to be here and talk to you guys about strategies. And as you know, the strategies were sent out to FTLAC on the 24th, and I trust that you've had time to review them. They were also sent out to Ftlac and the Board of Forestry, and we're going to have a public meeting December 7th to discuss them, and then Fmp joint stakeholder meetings on the 7th and the 9th. And you may be asking yourself what strategies are, and I would frame it like this. The goals are what we hope to achieve, and the strategies are how we plan to achieve them. And then also the measurable outcomes that we plan on taking to the board in March, at least partially, are what will tell us if we have achieved those goals through those strategies. So we have not define the measurable outcomes yet. And as you have seen, when you're looking through the strategies, you can probably see that there is a lot of interplay between them, a lot of trade-offs between them. And so what the core team is doing, and I don't know if the core team has been explained to you, but you're probably familiar with it. The core team is the team that is doing the technical work to write the forest management plan. They came up with the original goals and the original strategies. So the core team is currently doing what we are calling strategy mapping. And that is taking the strategies and looking at all of the interconnections between the strategies, identifying what we're calling tactics, which are really on the ground implementation of the strategies. And I'll try and illustrate that here in a minute when I look at a strategy. Because when you look at a strategy, it tells you what we want to do, but it still doesn't get down to the real granular of how we want to do it. And so the part of the strategy mapping is to get to the real granular of how we're going to do this. And then also the strategy mapping is going to tell us the interconnections between the strategies, like I said. So easy example is forest carbon versus timber revenue. You know, there's obviously some interplay there. And the planning level, are we going to have to plan for the strategies at the AOP level? Or are we going to have to plan for them at the IP level? Is it something that will just be carried out in the field? And so identifying the planning level will help us ensure that we don't miss the strategies as we're going through them. And then also, we're going to identify possible ways to measure the strategies. So we're going to identify possible measurable outcomes with the strategy mapping. And so I will share my screen. It's funny, you guys started talking about how many goals were there, and I had to scroll down, and then I lost my place where I was going to talk because I was scrolling down and listening to you guys talk about how many goals there were. So let's see.
I was going to say, Bodie, while you're looking for that, I think Commissioner Thompson has her hand up. Leanne?
Sir, I do. Thank you. Well, Commissioner Yamamoto, I'm going to sing my same song, which is when is the Department of Forestry and the Board of Forestry going to consider the impact on increased revenue from value-added forest products from mass timber technology? And to that point, is there the possibility that the Department of Forestry can, I want to say, break down silo walls in pursuing ecologically sustainable economic development for the betterment of their bottom line and our bottom line and the housing situation in Oregon and so on and so on? That's my general question. I'd appreciate that addressed if it's possible. Thank you for the time.
Yeah, thank you. So as far as the consideration of mass timber, I think you're speaking probably specifically to Freres, who's producing that. And we do definitely try and market timber sales for specific markets. The classic easy example is the pole market, where we really try and market to maximize revenue, but we also consider things like mass timber. And you know, the peelers, obviously, they like a little nicer log. And so ODF is constantly thinking about timber markets and realizing revenue there. And we realized that there is a very distinct market in the Santiam Canyon where they like a little nicer log, which actually requires a little older rotation. So I think I can very honestly say that we are thinking about timber markets and maximizing revenue when we're putting our timber sales together. It's in response to the ecological question. That's not my expertise area, where I know timber markets quite well. So perhaps someone else can speak to that.
Well, Bodie, I think I can. So I'm a former general manager of 2 wood treating plants, and we pressure treated a lot of utility poles. And I know utilities and the treaters really prefer coastal Doug fir. It's much easier to treat, and it's a great product. So, and yes, you can get an absolute premium from pole stock. You really can.
And the other thing is, I'm not just talking about current markets. I'm talking about proactively working with, for example, Oregon Housing and Community Services, so that we can calculate the economic benefit to communities by manufacturing the housing in those communities, really outside the box. I'm talking about breaking down the silos and thinking in new ways for maximum community benefit, money, ecology, all of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And Bodie, I hate to interrupt you one more time, but I need to go to Commissioner Banks.
I just wanted So Commissioner Yamamoto or Chair Yamamoto, I was curious if I could give my public comment or my comment regarding these FMP goals prior to the presentation, because I'll have to exit at 3:45 and I fear I'm not going to be able to get it in.
You did tell me earlier that you were probably gonna have to leave early. So Bodie, I hope you don't mind if we take just a few minutes here to allow Commissioner Banks to have some comment.
Feel free.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so it is a bit long because I didn't have the option for going goal by goal with you guys. But as I look at these goals, I think it's important to look at all of the proposed plans on the table. As everyone knows, there's currently a proposed HCP, which sets aside 50% of the forest with a focus on environmental. Now, given that the state is always speaking towards how economic, social, and environmental are balanced, 50% in one of the three of these doesn't seem awfully balanced to me. And as we look at each of these goals, it appeared that they were written almost ignoring the HCP in its entirety. It's unclear if these goals are to be implemented across the entire land base or if portions will occur at only specific areas. I hope that all of the environmental goals would be covered by the HCP. Any addition add-ons to the environmental side moves that 50% scale even further, leaving less for the remaining balance. And as I look at these 21 goals, I see 2 of them that are focused on economic, not exactly balanced in my personal opinion, and I'm sure as opinions of others. As it was brought up by the Board of Forestry, I think that one of the initial goals should be ODF financial viability. And as was stated at the board meeting, this was one of the primary reasons the management plan revision process began in the first place. I also believe that goal 13 and 14 should be moved to the top to emphasize their importance in this plan. The economic focus has been added as an afterthought here, and it reads as though it should be achieved once all other goals are met, instead of a goal that should be thought of about during every step of the process. And so when I look at goal 1, I feel placement of words matter in a document like this. With the court ruling in Lynn County case, economics should be the first listed in this goal, in my personal opinion. As I look at goals 2 and 3, if this goal is speaking to any areas that are outside of the designated reserve areas within the HCP, then we are again adding more to the environmental side, which is chipping away at our economics. When I look at goal 4, reading the HCP, I don't see where there is any ability to implement fuel breaks inside 50% of the forest. So is this goal only speaking to areas outside of the conservation areas, or has an edit been made that I don't know about inside the HCP to allow for heavy thinning or strip cuts in our mature timber that would potentially act as fire breaks? If not, we should clarify that we are only looking at this goal for 50% of the forest. It seems to me in goal 6, that this is a very long goal that could be summed up as a sub goal of 4. Given that we have set aside 50% of the forest in reserves, I am not sure if we can manage for diverse habitats in the remaining 50% and still provide a meaningful economic return to our counties. As I mentioned earlier, hopefully the plan would be for this goal to be encompassed by the reserve areas identified within the HCP and not impact those minority areas that are left. And as written currently, it does not appear to. So it appears to be written in such a way that it ignores what is done with the HCP. And so I have some examples. Sub goal 1, manage for a diverse array of cereal stages. Sorry, I teach cereal stages. Is this only in those areas of reserves, or will this be an additional draw from the economic acreage? So given there's a significantly less acreage available to work with, rotation ages in this area will likely need to be lower, to my assumption, in order to maintain any sort of financial return. Sub goal 2, manage for complex habitat of all ages. Again, if this is supposed to occur all throughout the forest, it would be a major hit to our economics. If instead we're counting the reserve areas in this, then that should be pointed out to us to remove any confusion in the future. Sub goal 3, create a variety of patch cuts. As I read through the draft HCP, I didn't see where there's an opportunity to create patch cuts on approximately 50% of our forest. So have edits been made to allow for small clear cuts inside the HCP or inside the HCAs? Or is this another area where you're going to be chipping away from our economics? Sub goal 6. So for Clatsop County, according to our local ODF office, I briefly had well, not briefly, it was a pretty long conversation. We are on track to have no active spotted owls next year. So we'll be in our 5th year. And so we will be looking at delisting those reserve areas. So why are we blocking out so many acres for a species that does not exist here? This may be a concern for other counties, but we should be looking at where species exist today and not making reserve areas where they existed 20 years ago. So if that means not covering a species in an area, it doesn't exist, it seems like a logical consideration to me. Frankly, I could talk about this on every sub-goal, but I think you see where I'm coming from. When I go to goal 10, I agree with the line items here, but I'm concerned that this was not considered when we were setting aside large swaths of land as no harvest areas. It's really sad to me that we couldn't have taken this approach when we were looking at concerns like drinking water and tried to see if we could have folded any of those acres in any planned reserved areas. So due to how the conservation areas were drawn, in my county specifically, I am concerned that the few remaining acres that we have to work with are going to be focused in areas where drinking water is an issue. Finally, I look at goal 13, I skipped a few. So it's great. It's a goal that speaks to economics, but those economics for me provide revenue to states, schools, taxing districts, fire departments, ports, our care centers. It's a lot of money for us. It's a pity that this goal wasn't considered when writing the HCP. Many taxing districts in my county were blocked in with reserve areas and will not see any revenue ever again. It is a concern that the current public draft of the HCP breaks this goal just out of the gate. So goal 14. So I have an editing note in goal 14. The sub goals here start at 3, but that's not too surprising that this is the area that the typos have occurred, because I don't feel like economics has been your focus or your concern when you were writing these goals to start with. And it is apparent that 13 and 14 were originally one goal among 20. So for those of you who were confused where that one extra goal came from, I have a feeling it was goal 13 and 14, but maybe I'm wrong. So as for sub goal 3, which states manage lands utilizing a suite of silviculture practices, I would love to do this. However, since 50% of the forest was put in reserve areas, the ability to manage in multiple creative ways has been removed. Likely, we will be able to clear cut, maybe do one thinning, replant, and have reserves. That is the prescriptions that we will be able to get to work with. But it doesn't seem like that's the case here. Additionally, this goal is another place where the goals seem to differ from the HCP, or at least the HCP that I read. So sub-goal 5 speaks to a timely response to landscape level disturbances, many of which are specifically forbidden in the draft HCP for over 50% of our land base. And so in summary, it would have been a great idea to have something like this or these draft strategies in place when we were designing, or when you were designing the HCP for us. I am sure that you had, if you had, maybe you would have chosen different locations for those reserve areas if you had spoken with us and taken into account our drinking water concerns or our lack of our lack of species that you're setting aside land for. What we have left is an HCP that sets aside 50% for an environmental concern. And now a number of goals that appear to set another large chunk aside for the same purpose, it seems. And it is unclear which of these goals will apply across the landscape and which of them will apply in just areas governed by the HCP or areas governed outside of the HCP and outside of the HCAs. There's a lot of confusion here in my boat. These items seem to be up to interpretation. to someone in the future. I just wish that we could make it clear where each of these goals are going to apply and where they're not going to apply. And I would really love economics to be at the forefront, because I recently watched our Board of Forestry meeting, and there was a comment from a Board of Forestry member, which I really appreciated. And that was a comment regarding, I wonder where all the money goes in these counties. And it's not a direct quote, mind you, it's my interpretation of what was being said. And I feel like each of us as counties should respond to that in a manner that's basically an email to each Board of Forestry member that says, this is where your money is going. This is where our state lands money is going. And for us, that's our Clatsop Care Center. That's beds in our Clatsop Care Center. That's fire departments. That's fire trucks, school districts. It's a lot of social services that we provide to our community. So thank you for your time. I'm sorry. Well, I'm not sorry. I feel like all of this needed to be said, and I just appreciate that you gave me the chance to say it in one big slam dunk versus parceled out across the meeting. And I apologize that when I have to leave at 3:45. So thank you.
Thank you for that very much, Courtney. We appreciate it. And Bodie, I apologize. I know we're running short of time, but Commissioner Tucker has his hand up, and we need to go to Will very quickly, please.
My apologies. So I couldn't but help to want to echo what was just said by Commissioner Bangs, but I would like to suggest formally that we actually renumber number 14 to number 1 and change its title to the sustainable yield. Timber production is important, but sustainable yield is the concept that I'd like to make sure we have. And then renumber number 13 as number 2, and add though to it a third bullet point that talks about the importance of the revenue to the longevity and the happenings inside of ODF, because the revenue that comes out of these trees is in fact extremely important to ODF. And the last one I'd like to talk about is the current goal number 2, which would be now number 4 if you renumbered. And I would propose that we change the way it reads so that it reads, implement proven climate smart forest management that supports climate adaptation, mitigation, and achievement of forest resource goals. And so it's, again, I'm striking the very beginning, the first about 7 words, 8 words, and adding implement proven climate smart management practices, because I believe that I don't want it to be the test center. In these forest lands, I want it to be doing things that actually are known to contribute. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Tucker. And yes, we have brought up the issue of numbering, which are the more important goals here. So we'll see where this goes. But Bodie, welcome to FTLAC. You're getting a taste of how these meetings get run. We appreciate, we apologize for taking your time here, but we'll give you as much time as you need to finish your presentation. Thank you.
Okay. I probably should have stopped screen sharing while you guys were all speaking, but I was just paying attention and didn't think of it at the moment. So I guess you've been watching me scroll up and down on my screen as I was looking for what you were talking about so I could follow along. But anyways, example, I was talking about strategy mapping, and starting with something that I'm frankly most familiar with is timber. So when you look at design timber sales, considering timber markets to maximize net revenue and volume, that's a strategy, right? But it doesn't say exactly how you're going to do it. So when we do the strategy mapping, things will come like consult with local log buyers to see where timber prices are, understand logging systems to understand how to maximize timber revenue. So for example, you're not going to want to hang something out to systems so you can maximize revenue. And then also look for market fluctuations, sell less in years possibly when markets are low, and a little more possibly when markets are high. And I know that doesn't really hit your guys' budgets wonderfully, except for the fact that you make more money overall, but then you have to save money. But from a making money overall perspective, it makes more money overall. So that's just an example of I wanted to talk about the strategy mapping that we're doing. And those are examples of tactics that would come out to achieve these. And then speaking about planning levels, you know, this would fit in at the probably more at the AOP planning level when you're considering right before you put up the timber sales. And as we've discussed before, there's obviously interconnections between timber revenue and almost everything else, whether they're positive trade-offs or whether they are mutually beneficial to each other. But the purpose of the strategy mapping is to tease all those things out and to give ideas for when we're directing people on the ground how to do things for the actual direction that we're going to give them, so they understand, okay, here's a strategy that it's clear what we want to do. It's not clear exactly how to do it. And so the purpose of the strategy mapping is to identify how we're going to carry these out and how they interrelate to each other. So that is the majority of what I had to talk about. I've been trying to take notes, but you all talk so fast, I don't get points down. So I guess with
this
that,
meeting is being recorded. So
okay, yeah. With that, I will open it back up to questions. If you would like to, you know, talk about specific strategies, I can stop sharing my screen now. And I do apologize for not stopping my share when you were talking. That was. So does anybody have any further questions?
So I'll just start, and so I'm sorry, Michael, but you know, and I had in my notes here that you know, lists are not strategies, and yet you've come out and said that, you know, this is a work in progress, and so you will have strategies in place. So I do appreciate that very much. I do. So let's go to Michael Wilson. Michael.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to follow up a little bit there on that and get to what you're saying, I think, as well. And so, you know, these is a list of strategies, and of course, it's like, oh, where's the meat here, right? And so we start to go from these really high level things into things that get more detail. There's a certain amount of prescriptive detail that the FMP will not have, right? And that's what Bodie's getting to with our the strategy mapping and identifying the sort of tactical level details. That's really not something that will appear in the FMP. It is something that's necessary for us to understand all the interactions among those things, so that when we go to do the modeling and really get a handle on the outcomes, that we can that we're aware of. But there are certain prescriptive details that, quite frankly, are just, you know, I mean, it's how you do your job here, right? So that part is in there, and it will always kind of be missing to an extent, at least for the broader audience. Now, you know, of course, we plan to remain engaged with Mark and Mike and so on to, you know, to be able to look at how that modeling is being done in more detail, but it just won't necessarily be apparent to a wider audience.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate that. Mark Rasmussen.
Thank you, Commissioner. Bodie, when I look at this, I see maybe some unevenness between the strategies under different goals. And I wonder if I should think about things that I don't see on this list of activities. If it's not on the list, does that mean maybe you won't do it? For example, I see a good thing. You proactively say we're going to use herbicides. So I think that's good, because now I know something about herbicides. I don't see anything here about pre-commercial thinning or log sales or tethered logging or all the things that I think you would be making a list about in terms of trying to manage the timber.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Are you done?
So should I be worried if I don't see something on this list?
No. The specifics that you called out, I can speak to definitely not. You know, we don't talk about pre-commercial thinning, but we do talk about a variety of silvicultural prescriptions, because if we were going to call every silvicultural prescription we were going to use, I think that would be just a really long list that I think would frankly doesn't need to be in there. So, and then you talk about tethered logging. When we're talking about, you go back to the revenue goal, seek out and incorporate new revenue streams. I mean, I guess tethered logging is not necessarily a new revenue stream, right? But it is a new way of doing things. And that is one of the points of seeking out the new is looking for a new, better way of doing things. And then, designing timber sales, considering timber markets, that's going to take into account new logging technologies. And I'm not going to say that we're going to do tethered logging everywhere. We have been experimenting with it in places on the forest, and the people that I primarily work with at ODF are very interested in new technologies in logging. They're also, very concerned, and rightly so, I think, about making sure that those things work and that the forest is going to be properly protected. But we are looking at tethered logging, and we've been doing some, I wouldn't even say experiments, because we've done some larger projects with it. So that's a long answer. I guess I could have just said, no, you don't need to be worried if it's not specifically in there. It doesn't mean we're not going to do it. If we say we're not specifically going to do it, then yeah, but you can't call out every single thing in a plan that you're going to do. You're always going to miss something. And so the broader concepts are what we were going for.
Yeah, so I get it. This is not an exhaustive list. So if you're looking for comments from me or anyone else about this, you don't want me to tell you all the things that aren't on the list. All I can tell you about is what I don't like that is on the list. Is that the kind of comment you're seeking?
Well, I mean, if you think something should be on the list, I think that's a valid comment. And
well, you're right. I don't want to write your whole plan for you and tell you everything you can do.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's a good idea, Mark.
Yeah, well, but I'm trying to figure out how to make effective comments here.
Maybe, yeah. Sorry, I'm sorry, Mark.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, one way to think about it is the real operational pieces, which to me, tethered logging would fall into that category. I would agree with Bodie, that type of information wouldn't be in an organ administrative rule. Really important for operational planning and decisions. It's going to drive prescriptions, and it's going to be driven by landscape conditions using tethered logging or any logging method as an example.
Well, forget my example. Just think about the fact that there are some things there in more detail and lots of things that aren't there.
Yeah.
In detail.
So to me, I think of a screen as far as how, what might be missing that you should be concerned about. I would say operational details, don't worry about, they aren't going to be there. They of course are considered in an operational context, but they won't be in strategies or in the forest management plan.
Okay. And what if there was something you were going to say, no, we're not going to do that? That's not in this list, is it?
Sorry, I need an example for that.
Well, let's say you did not do this, but if you weren't going to use herbicides, it wouldn't be in this list. But I wouldn't know that you weren't going to use it because I'd say, oh, that's just I think, oh, that's just an operational thing.
Mm.
So I'm wondering, is there something I should be worried about here when I look at this list? Because it's not there.
I would say in that, so for that example, no, and this is where it becomes where we don't want to be over prescriptive.
Yeah.
Just in terms, when we look at some of the strategies around different habitat types, early sterile habitat. So you have that on one end of, one part of the equation, and another part of the equation being timber production and so on and so forth. Obviously, there's a balance in there where, there's that right point, and that's the kind of detail that we really can't get to at the plan level.
Yeah, but you're addressing the example and not the larger question. That's what I'm trying to get at. What
the plan is.
Comments are useful here.
Sorry, Bodie, you look like you're going to answer, so I will.
Well, Mark, I don't want to waste your time writing, and I don't want to waste my time reading, but honestly, I think if you have a concern, the safer thing is to put it down and let us take a look at it. And that's maybe that's not the correct answer, but that's that's what comes to my mind, because it's hard to define exactly what would be missing, and we may have missed something. There's a group of people writing this, and we're not going to think of everything, and so I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah,
but
see, if I look at a Forest Service plan, I'd see a section called Standards and Guidelines, and that would tell me a lot about what I can't do out in the forest. Right, it's going to tell me all the restrictions on all the things that I can or can't do it. But that's not what this is. These are supposed to be strategies that are supposed to help me understand how you're going to achieve the goals. Now, we said before, the problem with these goals is they don't say what the state forester intends to achieve beyond just a broad statement, but sooner or later, I guess we'll get to that.
I think one thing that will help with that, so a couple of things there. When we talk about standards, as I think we probably talked about a number of times, those won't really appear at this level.
Right. Yeah.
Certain things that equate to standards in terms of, concrete objectives will appear in the IPs, and other things with standards will appear in our operational policies. Definitely in terms of how we do certain things exactly. But then the other piece that you're getting at there, Mark, I think really in terms of how do these things get balanced and what are those outcomes? Again, I don't think it's going to be terribly satisfying, if you will, for anybody until we get to the discussion around the modeling outcomes. And it's really where those performance measures end up being pegged for what that really help define that balance, I believe. And just if there is a carbon objective, or if there's a carbon performance measure versus a timber volume performance measure and habitat and so on and so forth, and how those things balance out, really provides the direction, if you will.
Yeah, so it all comes in the future sometime when we see some real numbers, huh? Okay, thanks, thank you.
But I guess what we would be looking for now, though, are those, are there big conflicts in the strategies, or something, particularly wrong with the strategy, like it's just completely, wrong-headed, if you will, wouldn't help achieve the goal, or can be better worded.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Commissioner Banks.
I just wanted to, I guess, address the giant elephant in the room, or mathematical elephant in this room. So we have the HCP, which is 50% of our state land base. And then we have this document that dedicates, I would say, 75% of its conversation to the environment. So it shoves that 75% over. And then we have a CCCP, which you really should rename. That is another environmental document. And so don't get me wrong, but I teach Algebra 1 and geometry to kids. And so I feel like I'm a pretty good mathematician when it comes to things. And that does not equal 30%, 30%, and 30%, which is what ODF has stated is permanent value in the past. And so I'm sitting here with this elephant in the room, trying to figure out how my community is going to pay for social services at all. like our sheriff's department, I'm looking at losing millions of dollars from it. So that is my elephant in this room, is HCP, all environment, has zero economics in it. This document, again, majority environment, with 2 goals of economics, 2. And then a CCCP. And don't get me wrong, I think that we should care for our environment, but this is not balanced. This is not balanced at all. And so I hate to have to leave the meeting on this note, but this is frightening. I'm just going to put it out there. I'm scared. I'm scared for my community. And I want you guys to know that. I'm scared.
Thank you, Commissioner Bangs. I know that's heartfelt. I know it is. Carla Chambers. Carla.
Okay, well, I think those are really thoughtful comments, Courtney. And at the last Board of Forestry meeting and in some of my discussions with Liz, and I just want you to know this. One thing that, and I'm a new board member, I've only been on, since earlier this year. But one thing that jumped out at me is this particular issue in my mind isn't about ODF and, versus the counties. I see us in the same situation here because state lands really is self-funded and depends on these very dollars for funding. And we also use those dollars for really fronting, fire funding for the state of Oregon and for ODF. So I've asked the ODF staff very thoughtfully, and I know they're going to do this for both parties. We need to understand not only the economic impact to these counties, we need to understand the economic impact to the Oregon Department of Forestry. If we lose revenue in state lands, how does that going to impact staff positions and our ability for this very cash and fire funding that we are incredibly dependent on? So I am first and foremost understand those 151 taxing districts and how important those are at the county level. And will really, I just want you to hear loud and clear from one board member. I really want to understand the revenue impact on the total equation here, because it strikes me, you just can't take this much out of production and not project, some revenue impacts. So I just want you to hear from a board member that is really on my mind. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Carla. I really do appreciate that. I do. Okay, where are we going from here? Liz, do we have any more items from the department to discuss?
Yes, we do. So
that's what I thought. Okay, I knew we did.
Yeah, we always want to have this time with Ftlac to give you the information that you need for any upcoming Board of Forestry agenda items. And so this next presentation is addressing the January Board of Forestry item, in which we'll be speaking to them about the management focus of these lands, which is one portion of the greatest permanent value rule. It's a piece that they have to review every 10 years, and now's the time for that. So Justin will walk you through that.
Great, thank you. Justin, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, are you seeing a presentation?
Yes, perfect.
Great. Great, thank you. So good afternoon. I'm Justin Buttress, Policy Analyst in the State Forest Division. And today just presenting a short presentation on our work that we're taking to the Board of Forestry on the management focus in the greatest permanent value rule. So just a short presentation that summarizes that material. First, I want to acknowledge that this group in the department do not necessarily agree on the interpretation of the greatest permanent value rule. I think that's obvious from the discussion today. Until the board rescinds or replaces the GPV rule, the board and the department are obligated to continue to use that GPV rule as it was adopted in 1998, which recognizes a full range of social, economic, and environmental benefits. Because of this, the analysis and work related to this topic are consistent with the current GPV rule and principles and findings articulated in the rule by the board. We recognize this deep disagreement exists and there is ongoing litigation. We're making sure we're following the current rules and policies as required by law. To be perfectly clear, the scope of this review is not on the entirety of the GPV rule, but rather the smaller portion of it, that's the management focus statement. So on to the substance of today's presentation. First, what is the management focus? It's established in rule. Specific references and full text of any of the rules I talk about today are in the staff report for your convenience should you want to reference those, but rather than reading off a bunch of numbers to you today, I'm just going to gloss over those. The focus is the central point of interest when it comes to the management of state forest lands. It can be thought of as the focal point for management and planning. The management focus provides the basic framework for securing GPV. The board is required to review the management focus at least every 10 years in light of current social, economic, social, economic, scientific, and silvicultural considerations. The purpose of this agenda topic with the board at its January meeting is to conduct this review. I see Carla's hand up, and I'm not sure if that was left over from before, or if there was a question. So, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, I'm not seeing that. Carla, did you have another comment?
Okay. Nope, okay. Looks like maybe it was just a glitch on my side. Apologies for that. Oops, need to advance my slides here. There's important policy context provided by other rules found in Division 35 that aid in the interpretation of the current management focus. First is the board principles and findings rule that's shown here, which states the counties have a recognizable and protected interest in the lands, and the management of these lands is not required to maximize revenues, exclude non-revenue uses, or produce revenue from every acre. Additionally, the management focus must also be pursued within the context of management that results in a high probability of maintaining and restoring properly functioning aquatic habitats for salmonids and other fish and aquatic life. It must protect, maintain, and enhance native wildlife habitats. It must protect soil, air, and water, and provide outdoor recreation opportunities. With that context setting, we now move into the management focus itself, which is the portion under consideration and review by the board. The current focus is shown here on this slide. The current management focus recognizes the working forest paradigm and calls on the state forester to maintain state forests as forest lands and to actively manage them in a sound environmental manner to provide sustainable timber harvest and revenues. The management focus does not speak to the pace and scale of active management, but instead establishes that active management is the central focus for state forest management. Importantly, the focus calls out specifically that the management must be in a sound environmental manner and the revenues and harvest must be sustainable. This current management focus centers management on the important role state forest timber sales have for providing revenue to the state, counties, and local taxing districts, which can offset revenues that otherwise come from other sources, such as personal income tax, and or provide revenues for community programs that otherwise wouldn't receive funding. As a reminder, the board is obligated to conduct its review in light of current social, economic, scientific, and silvicultural considerations. The division has been working on forest management policy projects with the board for nearly 10 years, and over the course of these efforts has had ongoing outreach and engagement and public comment opportunities with the counties and a variety of stakeholders. This has provided the board and the division with a significant amount of information related to the current social, economic, scientific, and silvicultural considerations when it comes to the management of state forests. The considerations are laid out in the staff report, but to highlight a few, we have revenues for counties and local taxing districts, resilient forests in the face of climate change, increased wildfire frequency and intensity, recreation, education, and interpretation, habitats for native fish and wildlife, including threatened and endangered species, and restoration of the Tillamook State Forest that's affected by Swiss needlecast. The current focus requires 3 conditions to be met. The forests are maintained as forests. The forests are actively managed in a sound environmental manner, and the forests generate sustainable harvest and revenues. None of these considerations appear to be incompatible with the working forest paradigm articulated in the current management focus. In other words, the board appears to have the latitude to emphasize or de-emphasize any of these aspects of forest management in the FMP or the HCP without changing the management focus. The division is recommending the board affirm the current management focus. The current management focus does not constrain the board's discretion in making policy choices related to the trade-offs and pace and scale of state forest management. These policy decisions for securing GPV can be made in the context of a working forest management focus. So we have thought of three options though really here, which is to accept and affirm the current management focus, to ask us for more information and analysis before making the decision, or to make the decision to conduct a rulemaking and make that change. Again, the division is recommending option one as the preferred action. This will allow current policy work to continue on their respective project timelines. Alternatively, should the board require more information or analysis, the division may have to slow or cease those projects depending on the scope of those data or information needs. Or if the board determines a change is warranted, then the division will cease other policy projects to ensure the future management focus is the focus that underlies the FMP and HCP. So thank you for your time today. We welcome any comments, questions, and of course your discussion on this topic.
Thank you, Justin. Appreciate that. I'm not going to get into an argument here about greatest permanent value. That argument has already been made, and that argument has already been decided in the Lynn County case. So I'm not going to rehash that here today. But so the way I look at it, we have the 1941 definition of greatest permanent value. We have the 1998 version of greatest permanent value. And then what we're looking at now, we're looking at the CCP and the HCP and the FMP, all of which continue to move the department away from the 1998 definition of greatest permanent value. And that's troubling to me, to say the least. But again, this has already been decided in circuit court. I'm not going to get into all the basics here, but I just asked the department to be very careful moving forward. And I asked the Board of Forestry to be very careful moving forward from here. Anyone else have any comments? Thank you, Justin. And Justin, you know these comments are not directed at you personally. Everyone's got a job to do, and I certainly understand that. I do. Jim Kelly, Jim.
Sure. Just wanted to make a couple of short comments going back to the goals. They did end up getting increased from 20 to 21. That was actually based on input from you guys. And I do want to address, I thought, Commissioner Banks had a lot of very thoughtful things to say, and I listened carefully. But I think this perception that there's 20 or 21 goals and only 2 of them have to do with timber production and economics, and that would somehow mean that the board values all of these other environmentally related issues at a greater level. That's just the wrong takeaway. The fact is, the economic goals in timber production, they're pretty simple to state, but recreation is very different from species protection versus, soil health and all of those. So it takes a longer list to cover all of those, but it doesn't mean that the Board of Forestry is putting all of those interests above timber production and the economic well-being of the counties. I do also want to say that this whole issue that Commissioner Bangs brought up around that the Board of Forestry really doesn't know where the money goes. And I think, you know, the assumption is it goes to a lot of critical services, but we as policymakers aren't really that aware, county by county, to the level of significance. What's the percentage of your budget? What is it actually funding? If you provided that to us, you know, I think it's not going to hurt the counties. I think it's going to be really helpful, you know, the more information that we have, and so that we really understand the implications of these decisions that that we face. So anyhow, great meeting. Really appreciate everything that people have brought forward. Thank you for including me.
Thank you, Jim. I do appreciate that very much. And just for everyone's edification, NOAA Fisheries has taken it upon themselves to do a financial look into exactly where these timber revenue dollars go. They've contacted our treasurer's office, not only in Tillamook County, but in many other counties. I have not seen the results of that yet, but I think it will be eye-opening to a lot of people. And as Commissioner Banks said, and I'm on my soapbox here, but one of the biggest issues to Tillamook County is our sheriff's office. We do not have 24-hour, 7-day-a-week patrols in Tillamook County because our sheriff's office is a fraction of what it should be. They are the largest general fund department that we have, and we cannot fund them appropriately because we don't have the funds. So, and when our population in Tillamook County, when it quadruples or quintuples during the summer months. Again, you know, our infrastructure, our public safety, our fire departments, our ambulance services, they all have to be able to stand up and take all of those calls for people. And so it's just a very difficult financial situation for the counties. And I could go on forever, but I won't. But Jim, I appreciate you. I do appreciate you being here today. I really do. Any other comment? And Liz, do we have anything else on the agenda?
We don't that I'm aware of, but I also want to say I appreciated the way that Commissioner Banks organized her comments, and it looked like maybe she had them written down. And so I would think she's gone now, but maybe we'll send her a note and suggest she email those to us.
Perfect.
I think
Appreciate that so much.
helpful.
So, and going back to some of Jim's comments, you know, and this is frustrating for FTLAC. It really is. I mean, we continue to make comments, and now we're doing written comments because we can't cover near what we need to cover in 15 minutes. So that's why we've gotten to written comments, and we try to highlight what we're talking about in our written comments with our verbal testimony. And again, I think we've made some very helpful, thoughtful comments to the Board of Forestry over the past couple of board meetings. And it just seems like what's coming out of the department just is not changing. And I think that's what's frustrating to most of us. And I don't know when or if we're ever going to see any changes to what you're doing. I don't know when the paperwork comes out for these meetings every month. You know, nothing has changed. Well, we went from 20 to 21 goals, but I'm just at the end here. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I think we heard you loud and clear, and I think we can make some improvements in terms of getting feedback back to you all, and certainly we'll talk about that and see what changes can be made. I mean, we get, you know, as you know, we get a lot of testimony from a lot of different folks, and so the staff tries their best to sort through all of that. And, you know, give you a silly example is that I thought one of those goals should be, we should get rid of one of those goals. And I made that recommendation. It's still there. They didn't get back to me and tell me why they thought I was wrong. So you're not completely alone. But I guess I would like to feel your
pain, Jim. I do.
Yeah. I would like to, in my thoughts here today is it's just a thank you from the board and from the department to Liz for her service and all that she's done. She's been really great, and we're really going to miss her. She's been in this position a long, long time. So thank you, Liz.
Yeah, thank you, Jim.
I echo that, but at the same time, I welcome Kate Skinner. Kate, you've got your work cut out for you here. You can see by these meetings. But I know Kate will do just a terrific job. I know she will. So last thing, do we have any final comments from anyone? Hang on, I may have one on my phone. Hang on.
I have one about revenues. You know,
Please, John, go ahead. No.
A good share of these revenues, I'm guessing about 40%. That's about the share that our public schools get of county tax revenues. And I believe that under school equalization, about 40% of the revenues that go to the county are passed on to the schools. And that reduces the state's school equalization obligations by about 40%. So round numbers, about a third goes to the Oregon Department of Forestry. Now, the counties normally skim a little off the top. We learned from the state how to do that of the remaining 70%. But 40% of what the local taxing districts get goes to schools, and that offsets school equalization from the state, dollar for dollar. So you're looking probably where over half of the money goes back to the state, half of the harvest revenues. You might want to check to see if I'm correct, but I think I am.
Commissioner Sweet, I assume that that's all in statute that we don't control or you don't control?
We distribute the money in respect to the percentage that each taxing district gets of the whole. So if the harvest takes place in our case, for instance, in an area that is within North Bend School District's tax base, then North Bend School Districts gets a share of the money that you pass through to the counties. And that's a big chunk.
Well,
and that in turn goes back to the state by just reducing their obligation under school equalization.
Yeah, I understand that part. I guess for the 40% piece that go into schools of the money that is delivered to the county, is that in statute that 40% has?
No, it's not. It depends on, but it's a rule. It's about what ends up. That's about the share that our school districts get, at least down here in our neck of the woods, of the total property tax collections in the county. About 40% goes to education.
Thank you.
Justin, I saw your hand up. Did you have a comment?
No, I was just going to try to add some clarity on the revenue distribution thing, but I think we've got it covered.
Perfect. And again, that is work that No Fisheries is currently doing, but the financial aspects, and they were very clear on the information they wanted. What special districts, how does it get distributed from the counties? When you look at Tillamook County, of all the money that we get in timber revenue, the county itself probably keeps 15%, if that. The rest immediately goes out to special districts, fire, 911 center, schools, libraries, things of that nature. So, you know, it's in some instances, like Tillamook County, it's a lot of money. But the county doesn't keep a lot of money. It really doesn't. And I need to make one other point here is that, you know, the commissioners here on this call, we are part of the executive branch of government, and our input isn't the same as other stakeholders. And I just want to make that clear that we are elected officials. We are. So when you add up the population of the 15 trust counties, I think you're going to find that that's a good sized portion of the population. It is. So again, I just wanted to throw that out there. Any other comments? For the good of the order.
Yeah, maybe I will say something
sure,
if you're okay with that, David, especially
absolutely.
as I walk out the door.
Uh-oh. Are you gonna slam us, Liz?
I'm not at all. And I just wanted to say, you know, it kind of, you've referenced this a couple of times, David, which is these can be difficult conversations. And so we end up, you know, having this kind of dialogue in these meetings. And what I would just point out is that I think that really highlights the value and importance of public forests in general. And I would argue that state forests, we should be really proud of how we manage our state forests and the benefits that we're able to provide off of such a relatively very small land base as compared to other public landowners. And so I am proud of that. And I also think that recognizes why these conversations are so challenging, because there are a lot of expectations. That comes from a place of we've been able to meet those expectations for decades. So just a plug for state forests and the hardworking people, many of which are on this phone, that really are doing everything they can for the rural communities. Many of them, most of our folks live in those rural communities.
Absolutely. I appreciate that very much. And again, Liz, we're going to miss you dearly. We hope you continue to check in with us from time to time. We promise not to beat up on you.
I'll hold you to that one.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, it's being recorded, so yeah, you can hold me to that. Okay, anything else from anyone? With that, we will adjourn this meeting at what time is it? My goodness, 4:08. We're not too bad. 4:08 p.m. And if I don't talk to you before then, I wish everyone the happiest of holidays coming up. This is a great time of the year. I hope everyone enjoys family and friends, and take a step away from these types of issues, maybe for just a little bit, and have a great holiday. And we'll see you all after the first of the year. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.